Meet Carlos. It's 10 p.m. on a Monday. Carlos stands in his kitchen, gripping the counter as his heart pounds and sweat beads on his forehead. His thoughts spiral. Am I having a heart attack? He's rushed to the hospital only to be told it's not his heart. It was a panic attack. Carlos is a senior manager at a motor vehicle manufacturer in Michigan. Over the past few months, mounting work demands and relentless pressure have started to take their toll. His new VP, Mark, is a no-nonsense leader who answers emails within minutes, and he keeps everyone on their toes with his intense focus and high expectations. And while Mark hasn't been outwardly critical, Carlos constantly feels like he's falling short. To keep up, Carlos works late nights and weekends, meticulously preparing for every meeting and feeling like he's ready to answer all questions. But his efforts come at a cost. The job he once loved now feels like a source of constant anxiety. It's even leading to him drinking more, having a few beers every night after work. And the weight of it all exploded when he had the panic attack in his kitchen. Carlos has always been a perfectionist, someone who overanalyzes and plays out every what-if scenario. And that mindset has helped him to achieve success, but lately it feels like his greatest enemy. He's burnt out, disconnected from his family, and questioning if he can keep going at this pace. For the first time in years, Carlos feels stuck, unsure of how to regain control of his life and career. Today, I'll be speaking with Jeff Salzenstein, a world-class athlete turned performance coach, professional speaker, and entrepreneur. Jeff has dedicated his career to helping high achievers like Carlos manage stress and pressure while maintaining peak performance. I'm eager to hear Jeff's perspective on how to help Carlos overcome his anxiety, rebuild his resilience, and find balance without sacrificing his drive to succeed. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Jeff, when I encountered some of your content online, one of the things that really got me intrigued was a story you told about your experience as a tennis pro. You called it your big moment at the US Open. And I would love it if you could share that story as well as what you learned from that experience.
Sure. 1997, second round US Open night match in front of 24,000 people, millions watching on TV. I'm inside Arthur Ashe Stadium. And it's my first full year on the Pro Tour. I'm playing world number 2, Michael Chang. And I burst onto the scene. I'm the new kid on the block, the new young American. I had won my first round against a guy about 60 in the world. And I come onto Arthur Ashe Stadium. And leading up to that match, 3 days leading up to that, I just got more and more nervous. The rumination, realizing that I was about to play on this massive stage on TV, John McEnroe calling the match. And I remember walking out on the court and just feeling so nervous. Like it was almost like I couldn't get my body to relax or just to be me. And, as a tennis player, you learn the tools and the skills to be able to do that in the moment. But sometimes it's just too difficult. The moment's too big. And when I got out there, the first 4 games of the match, I was tight. That's a tennis term. In tennis, we talk about someone who's tight or nervous. But somehow I held serve twice and Chang held serve twice. So it was 2-2 in the first set when I finally took my first deep breath. So I take a deep breath And that moment, I dropped into a zone. And for the next 15 minutes, I started kicking Michael Chang's ass. If you're watching the match, you would not know who the number 2 player in the world was. In fact, you might think that I was. I was probably more athletic than Chang. He was faster than me, but I was taller. I had a bigger serve. I was left-handed. I had a 30-inch plus vertical jump. And I was just crushing this guy. And he looked bewildered at times. So I get to 5-4 in the first set. And I'm 1 point away from winning the set. I hit my best serve, wide slice out wide. I serve and volley. I hit a backhand volley to the open court. Chang, one of the fastest guys in the world, couldn't run it down. And I'm walking back to the baseline after I win the set on Michael Chang, the crowd standing up, almost like a standing ovation after the first set. And the TV camera pans in on me. And I have this smile on my face. And that's when the match ended. And the reason the match ended was because the dominant thought in my head was, Jeff, thank God you didn't embarrass yourself tonight. And, in that moment, I couldn't overcome my limiting thoughts and beliefs. I couldn't overcome the waves of pressure and anxiety that crept in throughout the match. My level dropped 3 to 5%, but just enough for the number 2 player in the world to raise his game and beat me in the next 3 sets. I always like to share that story. It's a powerful one for me because it was my big moment on the big stage at the US Open. But, all of us are ordinary in some ways with our thoughts and how we show up in the world. And all of us have extraordinary gifts inside of all of us waiting to be untapped and to come out. Yeah. And so even though on the big stage I looked extraordinary and I was kicking butt, inside there was some ordinary stuff going on. And so I like to connect to folks and people to let them know we're all in this together. We're all trying to solve this riddle called life. And we all have limiting beliefs. And so when I do coaching and speaking and when I help people, that's one of the things we look at is a limiting belief. So the one big lesson I learned was obviously being aware of your thoughts, being able to reframe them, also having the tools to be able to manage the nerves and any anxiety or worry or rumination that comes up. And many of us don't have those tools. And I went on a quest throughout my professional career, then my coaching career, to learn how I could best serve others.
Yeah.
And super powerful experience for me that I can share with others that are wanting to be in the top 1% and do amazing things in their lives.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing the story, Jeff. It's an incredible story. And I think that there's a lot to be learned, I think, from competition, from sports. I recently took up tennis. I don't know if I shared that with you, but just about like the last year, I've been playing a little bit. My fiance and I grew up playing basketball. My fiance's really athletic. And so we started playing tennis. And as we're playing, I take things from it. I feel like there's a lot of analogy there in tennis, the experience of the back and forth. And so I wanted to ask you, if you think about your experience in tennis and how you apply some of those learnings into your work now, what are some life lessons that you gather from the tennis court?
Well, one thing that came up recently was Roger Federer did the commencement speech for Dartmouth College in June. And he brought a lot of the concepts around resilience and bouncing forward in tennis and getting through hard times. He brought it to the world with this speech. In the tennis circles, we've studied this for quite a bit. And what he revealed is that he's the best player in the world, or Novak Djokovic or Rafa Nadal. They're number 1 in the world or number 2 in the world. What percentage of points do the best players in the world win? So throughout an entire year, what percentage of points does Roger Federer win when he's number 1 in the world and beating just about everybody? Want to guess?
I have a feeling it has to do with some need for adaptability and response, but you tell me.
53%. So the best player in the world is only winning 53% of all the points that he plays throughout the year. So where I was 100 to 200 in the world for most of my career, I'm actually losing more points than I'm winning. And so, of course, the analogy and crossing over into life is we're going to lose a lot. Depends how you define losing, but there's going to be a lot of no's. There's going to be a lot of things that don't go our way. And I think tennis prepares us for life because every day when we get on the court, whether it's a practice match or a real match, we're losing a lot of points. And we have 25 seconds between each point that we play, win or lose, to regulate, to breathe, to analyze the situation, decide how we're going to execute and take action on the next point. There's no coach on the court telling you what to do. It's you. And you have to learn how to manage yourself and regulate yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, the choices that you make. And so I've had since 4 years old, that's all I've done is practiced that. And you can take it in a healthy direction or it can go in unhealthy directions. Many tennis players struggle with mental health issues because so much is determined by whether you win or lose, what your ranking is.
Yeah.
And if you lose, you can't blame it on the coach and you can't blame it on the 5 other people or the 10 other people on your team. It's just you. So yeah, this concept that we lose a lot, we have to bounce back or bounce forward. We have to develop the resiliency with every point game match that we lose. Every week, there's only one winner in a tournament. So even if you get to the finals, you still lose at some point in the week, and you still feel the pain of losing because you've invested so much into something, and it's on you.
Yeah.
So I think it's the most unique sport in that respect. I mean, boxing is one-on-one, but how many times do you box throughout a year? Whereas in tennis, you're playing tournaments almost every week. Golf, you're playing against the course, you're playing against yourself. There's obviously other people on the course, but this one-on-one or in doubles 2-on-2, where you have an opponent and you have yourself and there's no coaching. In golf, you have a caddy with you. So I think it's the most unique sport and it prepares us to develop that resilience.
Yeah. 53%. Wow. Yeah, there's a similar stat, right, with baseball too. If you hit 1 out of every 3, you're considered one of the best in baseball. you know, so it
Right.
takes a lot to have to keep coming up to the plate. But as you said, it isn't as frequent as tennis, whereas it's constant. You're asking a lot out of yourself. And what I also find with tennis is, you have this moment where you strike the ball over the net. And then after that, you don't know what's coming. You have to be prepared and you have to get yourself in a situation where you're responding to whatever comes your way. And I feel like that's what life is. I mean, so little of life is the actions we take, and so much of it is how we're responding to the things that are coming our way.
That's exactly right. It's just, yeah. I mean, you have no idea what's coming at you on a tennis court. Although, when you play for a long time, you start to see patterns.
Right.
And so that's helpful to know. And then also, if you have a clear strategy, if you know yourself on the tennis court, if you know how you play, if you know your strengths and weaknesses, if you can solve for the other opponents their strengths and weaknesses, then you can devise a game plan both before the match and then you can adjust as you go along. But when people get stressed out, when they get emotional, when they get frustrated, the brain and the body doesn't work as well. So when that happens, then you lose the ability to problem solve. So when I work with athletes, especially with athletes, tennis players, golfers, other athletes, what we realize is, again, is if they get frustrated and stressed out, the stress response starts to get to them. They can't see the entire picture.
Yeah.
And then they can't make these adjustments from a more grounded, calm place. And so that's why having the tools and the techniques to be able to manage all of this, it separates the average from the good and the good from the great.
Yeah. It makes absolute sense because the faculties of being able to problem solve and be able to have more objective reasoning, go away when you feel like you're in a fight or flight situation. Now, you went down this path of really looking into this because, and you've shared this so openly, so vulnerably, that you went through some injuries in your career. So, talk to us a little bit about that. Having had that experience of you had this highlight there, this moment, this big moment, the US Open, and then you had some injuries, and then it led you down a path of learning. Tell us about that.
I play Michael Chang. I lose the match in 4 sets. It was an entertaining match. The next day, I'm in a Midtown Manhattan hotel suite, and I'm with super agent Jeff Schwartz. And Jeff Schwartz was Pete Sampras's agent at the time. And I'm sitting in this suite looking across from this guy. And, I'm 23 years old. I had graduated from Stanford. I wasn't supposed to be a pro tennis player, but I transformed in college. I burst onto the scene. I played Chang at the Open. And now I'm sitting across from this super agent. And he and his colleague are looking at me saying, "Man, you were awesome last night. We want to sign you." So I signed a contract with IMG, and I thought my pro tennis career was about to take off. And the universe had different plans. 3 months later, in an off-season training session, I felt a sharp pain in the front of my ankle. It was misdiagnosed for 8 months. I finally had ankle surgery. I came back 6 months later, my first match back, playing in Miami, Florida at the Miami Open, which was a different name back then. I felt a click in the back of my knee, a pain in the back of my knee, and that led to knee surgery. So before the age of 25, my body was falling apart, and I had a decision to make. I had hit my rock bottom where I thought my pro tennis career was taken away from me. I didn't know if I'd be able to play again. I had all these injuries. My body was failing me. And I had a choice to make. Do I go get a 9-to-5 job, or do I adjust or make changes or look for ways to get better? And that's what I chose. And so that's when I went to my first yoga class at 24 years old. And I started just studying everything around holistic health and healing and performance, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And I'm doing this at 24, 25 years old. So probably a bit ahead of the curve, just because my career, my injuries forced that to happen. And because I was such a curious person, I wanted to learn. I didn't want to just accept that my body was failing me. So I just went on this journey. And what I realized over the next 5 to 10 years was that I actually probably enjoyed studying all these things more than competing on the pro tour. So it's a very lonely world to travel every week on your own, unless you can afford to travel with a coach or a team. So I did a lot alone. It was lonely. You lose a lot. It's frustrating. But in my free time, I was studying all this cool performance stuff, doing it for myself. That allowed me to break the top 100 in the world for the first time at the age of 30. It took me 7 years on the pro tour to do it. Not a lot of fanfare behind it, but I did get to that number. Ironically, around belief systems, I think my number was always, I just want to get to the top 100. And yes, I did create a new set point, but I think there were beliefs that kept me from maybe doing better. And then at 33, 34 years old, I had had a few more injuries after I broke the top 100. I couldn't really capitalize on getting to the main draw of the big events. I had more injuries, plantar fasciitis, shoulder stuff, groin stuff, you name it. 33, 34, I was really burned out and stressed out. So even though I was learning all these tools, my heart and my head were not aligned anymore with pro tennis, doing it for 11 years. I was tired, but I didn't know how to quit. I didn't know how to move on. I didn't know how to transition. That's a big thing when I work with clients, is around transition and around going through these tough times. And I didn't know what to do. And it was a really confusing time. And it was so stressful. I was feeling this anxiety and this worry that I believe my physical and mental health started to go downhill, to the point where I actually couldn't compete anymore because my body was not right. I was feeling dizzy. I was feeling off. Still didn't know what to do. I was in a holding pattern. And that's when I went to go visit my family in Florida. I have two families, one in Colorado, one in Florida. My father, stepmother, and siblings lived in Florida. And I went to go visit. And that's when I really saw my brother struggling with addiction. I saw it firsthand. He's 17 years old at the time. And I saw him lying on the floor, passed out, foam coming out of his mouth. I don't know if you want to call it an overdose, but it certainly was scared the what out of me.
Yeah.
And when I saw him lying there, it was like that was the next moment, the defining moment. Like, I've got to do something. So that's what I did. I fully committed to supporting my brother, getting him into a rehab facility, recovery center, having him come live with me in Colorado. I moved home to where I grew up in Colorado, and I started teaching tennis, started working with kids. And so that moment was really pivotal for me to move on to the next phase. And I quickly realized that I love coaching more than I liked competing on the pro tour. It was more fulfilling. I was helping people. I could see the difference. I could help someone's forehand or their mental game. And that began my journey with other clients around helping them be the best version of themselves. Started on the tennis court, and then, of course, has moved off the tennis court.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story about your brother. I know that was, I'm sure, a very difficult thing to have to experience. And you brought up earlier in your story about that match with Michael Chang, where something clicked on for you, and you were just present. You were there. And I've heard you talk about how where we can get caught is when we're thinking about the past, or we're caught in thinking about the future. You've talked about that quite a bit. And in that story that we started this episode on with Carlos, he describes himself as an overthinker. He's planning out all the what if scenarios. So can you talk about that connection between when we're caught in our own minds about the past, thinking about the past, or thinking about the future, and then how it impacts our productivity or even our overall well-being? Talk to me about that connection between getting caught in our minds and then what it leads to. What is the result of that?
Right. I mean, the mind is obviously very powerful, and it's there for us to support us if we can use it to our advantage. But it also can really impact us negatively and hurt our performance. And so when we are fully engaged, when we're in our zone of excellence, when we are in what's called a coherent state, our body and our mind is aligned and in sync. And I just mentioned, earlier how, because I was ruminating and stressed out and in my head so much and not connected to my body and my heart, then my body said, "Hey, no more. We're just going to make you dizzy," and, it might sound a little woo woo, but I totally believe that if we are not accessing our body, our hearts, if we're not connected to our mind, and we're only stewing and spinning, that's when we get out of balance. And we're just being shown that we're not at our best when we're ruminating, and especially when 80% of our thoughts are negative. So, and that's all by design. It's in our biology that in order to keep us safe, we have to look for things out in the world that may appear to be a threat. Thousands of years ago, it was a saber-toothed tiger. Now it's a nasty email or getting cut off in traffic. And so, yes, we're not going to die from those things, but our nervous system and our amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, it is always looking out to keep us safe. And so that rumination, that negativity is just a way to protect us and keep us safe. And one of the most important skills to learn in this situation is to be able to connect to our bodies and get our body and mind to align. And so that's where there are different practices, and becoming self-aware of when this is happening can really help. So with Carlos and with other people that I work with, the common theme is the overthinking and being in the mind. We're not taught to process our emotions. We're not taught how to reframe our limiting thoughts in the moment. We're not taught how to get in our bodies. The good news is that a lot of people can practice different techniques and tools that are really simple, and they're already doing whether they realize it or not. The fact that when you hear someone say, "I got to get my workout in or I'm going to be off," well, you're getting in your body. You're you're moving your body. You're doing those things that can help you access those feel good chemicals and access your body. So, getting outside, the simple act. I was working with a client earlier this year who was struggling with panic attacks and a lot of anxiety. And the first thing a lot of times I ask is, what their cadence is throughout the day. What are the habits and what are the actions? And one of the most simple things you can do is get up with the sun, right? Get outside,
Yeah.
walk in sunlight, because this particular client was waking up and staying in bed, blinds are drawn and doesn't want to leave his room. So as soon as he got outside and went for a walk, a lot of things started to change. And it's interesting. Some of the simple things in life are the ones that really help us.
I find that the simplest things in life are the greatest things that we can tap into. Once someone said, the simplest teachings are the best teachings. I remember that from a mentor many years ago. And I really believe that. I think that the complicated stuff is what keeps us in that loop of unnecessary suffering. And that's where we feel stuck. And I think the reason why you find so much value in suggesting to people, hey, getting outside, is because when we get outside, we immediately connect with the beauty of nature. There's a connection that happens. And you mentioned your client when waking up and the blinds are shut and they're in isolation, they feel disconnected. So the simple practice here is find ways to connect, whether that's connecting to your own body or connecting to nature.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Just taught the class right there.
No, but that's just, it's so spot on what you were saying, in that it's the simple things. Now, you mentioned techniques and tools, and I always want to inquire about that because I know that you're an advocate for certain breathing techniques and ways in which one can work through that chronic stress. So what's a technique that you often share with your clients, or you would share with Carlos in this scenario, who is suffering with panic attacks? What's a technique that you would give him?
Right. Well, with Carlos and with others, again, we get them outside. So that's one. I also check in to find out if they're drinking alcohol, because there's a direct correlation between anxiety and the stress that people are feeling when they drink alcohol. So one of the things that that I help clients with is either significantly decrease or move to an alcohol-free lifestyle. And the new flex right now is alcohol-free. I mean, a lot of people are jumping on the train and they're realizing the benefits, because in our society, somehow we're taught that alcohol is cool and it's okay and it's fun. I mean, it is fun in many ways. You talk about the connection piece. I have a client that I'm working with where he's got his drinking buddies. Well, what happens if he stops drinking? And yes, he can go out with them, but it can be a different energy. Like, I'm having soda water and everyone else is drinking alcohol. So then you lose a connection piece. I've experienced that, where I don't go to parties or bars with my friends that I used to go with. And so then you miss out on some conversation, whether it's deep or not deep, you're missing connection.
Yeah.
So alcohol in many ways is a connector. At the same time, it's a poison, and it's hurting our health and our performance. And so there's a lot of beliefs around that. And how do we navigate that when the world accepts it as normal? Whereas heroin and cocaine, you have a problem. But if you drink alcohol on the weekends, you're fine.
Well said. Yeah, well said. There's a book that my fiance and I both read called The Naked Mind.
Yeah, that's the book I give my clients.
That's so funny. I recommend it to everyone who's interested in what you just said there about the truth about alcohol. And also in the book, she talks about exactly what you said, that social connection piece. And it could be a challenge for sure. And I feel like society has moved more towards alcohol free. I'm with you. There's mocktails now at bars, and they have very clever ways to make you feel included if you're not drinking. My fiance has been alcohol free for years now, and she's found a really healthy way to still connect with her friends and others, even though she doesn't drink any alcohol. So when someone is struggling with that as an outlet, like that's in Carlos's case, that's his outlet. He's numbing himself
Right.
because he's feeling so much of that anxiety. How do you help people work through that? And
Yep.
you mentioned, your brother was someone that you stepped in and there was a lot going on there with some addiction challenges. But how do you help people through that, Jeff?
Yeah. So the first technique is around the breathing. There's a lot of different techniques out there, mindfulness practices and breathing. What I'm really passionate about sharing and teaching is something called coherence. It comes from the Heart Math Institute. They've been researching heart brain coherence for over 30 years. The big boys like Boeing and Cisco and Harvard Medical School and Stanford, all of them have either implemented this particular program or they have studied it and researched it. And what happens with heart focused breathing or coherence training / breathing is when you do a specific breathing technique where you slow your breath down and you focus on the area of your heart, because the heart is actually exponentially more powerful than the brain. The magnetic field, when they measure it, is 100 times more powerful coming out of the heart than the brain. So here we are trying to navigate the world up here, but we're infinitely or exponentially more powerful down here magnetically and also electrically too. So the electric energy, the magnetic energy, it's all science. So this is not like, we're not going woo here. This is all based on science. That's what I love about it too. When I speak and when I coach, I'm able to show people the science around this. So 5 minutes a day of quick coherence breathing or heart focused breathing, where you put your attention and awareness on your heart, you slow your breath down. And then the secret sauce is to layer in an emotion like appreciation, care, compassion. You practice that 5 minutes a day. They did a study with 14,000 participants, 6 to 9 weeks, so 2 months. Sleep improved by 38%. I think it was 38. Yeah. Or maybe 36, in that range. Calmness, 49%. Anxiety, depression, and anger decreased by 67%. So if someone's struggling with anxiety and they know 2 months from now, they gave themselves 5 minutes to connect to their heart, they could decrease their anxiety by 2/3. I say, would you do it? And everyone raises their hand. Now, actually doing it is a completely different story, right?
Oh, yeah.
We know that 10% of people are probably going to walk out of a room after they learn something and actually take action. The remaining 90% won't make the lasting changes to improve their performance and health. So that's where coaching and accountability comes in. Getting an accountability partner or a coach, then you're 67% more likely. Again, I have a coach now and I know I've got to do my homework.
Yeah.
If I don't, I can kind of, shirk a little bit. So the heart focused breathing, the coherence training, love working with clients around it, use it in my workshops. We work with organizations around embedding this into the culture. Because imagine you're trying to change a culture in a company. You're trying to improve employee engagement. You're wanting to improve productivity and performance. You have to start at the level of self, of the individual, and get everybody to start making these changes. Otherwise, people showing up in an incoherent state where they're frustrated, tired, angry, all of the impatient, worried, all of those emotions decrease our energy. They actually make the cells in our body weaker. So they decrease our energy capacity. And then we're not able to use our brain and our intuition and our decision making as well. So that's why it's so important within an organization or as leaders or as performance athletes or artists that we're able to get into this coherent state more consistently. And if you're practicing this consistently, then you just obviously get more skilled at it over time. The other technique that I really like and Um, it's called tapping or emotional freedom technique. And there are specific points on the face and on the body that you can tap, just like I'm tapping right now. And athletes are doing this where they're kind of like sneaking in taps while they're on the course or on the court or on the field. But what's happening when you tap is you're making a connection with the body and the mind by tapping these acupressure points. And you can actually do it saying statements out loud. You can say negative statements and then you can flip them. But what happens, the science shows that in just 2 minutes, your cortisol levels drop by doing this. It's really miraculous that we have something like coherence training a few minutes a day or a couple minutes throughout the day where we tap into appreciation to our heart. And then we have tapping where it actually sends a signal to the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, to calm down and it's okay. And these are little tools that are so powerful that can transform people's lives. And what I think is happening too, is when you tap these points, it's like a pattern interrupt. So if you're ruminating and all of a sudden you start tapping and you start saying the word, I'm feeling confident now, or I deeply and completely love and accept myself, or my body and my mind can relax, you're embedding that, you're firing and wiring the brain, and you're training the body that you're okay, even in maybe a perceived stressful situation. So those are the two big go-tos that I use. There's more, of course, if you want to go into it, but those are two really big ones.
And it's cool to hear that you use them yourself as well as you teach others the same practices, because it's the best thing when we see the results within ourselves and then we have that experience and then we can share it with others. So everybody listening, I just want to repeat back something Jeff said here. If 5 minutes a day of a certain practice would reduce your stress and anxiety by 67%, would you do it? I hope your answer, as you're listening, is yes. And I hope that you increase that percentage of 10% to well beyond of any of the people who take action, because it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes being intentional and making the time for something that could have that kind of transformative effect on your overall well-being and your performance. One thing that I'm really curious to ask you about, you brought up the word quite a bit in our conversation already, and I know this is something you really hone in on in your speaking and your coaching, and that's beliefs. And limiting beliefs being what oftentimes gets in the way. So in the professional world, like in Carlos's example, he's very fearful of his manager or what his manager would think. And I think there's something there with a limiting belief he has in himself and his ability to perform. So how do you help people work through limiting beliefs? What are some of the steps that you take them through, or ways in which you help them to reframe things so that they have a healthier belief system?
Right. Well, so a couple things. Great question. There's a dynamic there where the manager, and this is a common problem in organizations, where the managers and the leaders, they have to have the growth mindset to be available to help someone like Carlos. And that's a massive challenge these days when leaders are not working on the things we're talking about, and it creates an unsafe environment. I was working with an HR group recently, and that's psychological safety is a big challenge in their organization. And I believe, again, it starts at the top, because if the top is doing these practices and then saying, hey, we're going to work with you on this is the foundation. And yet it's not the foundation for most organizations. A lot of it's more a couple things. It's about obviously the bottom line, but also people are trying to change culture from the mind. And we need to go deeper and get into our hearts and have these practices that connect the bot, that align the body and the mind to create a coherent state. So in order to, that's how you change culture. That's how you create transformation in an organization. If you try to do it from the level of the mind, there's a good chance it's not going to work.
Mm.
With Carlos specifically around limiting beliefs, one exercise that I like to do is you get out a piece of paper and then you can draw a line down the middle, and on the left-hand side, you write down these limiting beliefs that are showing up. And what's really interesting about this is the science and the research shows that negativity is 4 to 7 times more powerful than positivity. So the old adage that if you say one negative thing, you've got to say 5 positive things to offset it. It's maybe something we learned in kindergarten.
Yeah.
It falls in that range. And then it's 10 times more powerful to say things out loud than to keep it to yourself, which means it's 40 to 70 times more likely that bad things or negative things will happen if you say them out loud. Now, the caveat there is you clearly don't want to suppress or internalize these emotions or these thoughts or beliefs. You want to get it out, but you also don't want to be showing up every single week to your therapist or your coach talking about everything that's wrong. So what I like to do is write down these limiting beliefs on the left side. And sometimes I'll have them verbalize it because, we're on a call. But other times I'll say, I don't even want you to say them out loud, just show them to me. And then we're going to flip it so they can send me a screenshot or so just ways so that we're not always repeating the thing, like we're not embedding it deeper into our unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Feel that out. But also with the tapping we do, that's a good way to tap and say the negative thing or the limiting thing while you tap, because it neutralizes it. Mm-hmm. So we look at the limiting beliefs and then we work on flipping it to something they want to create. So in the case of Carlos, I'm afraid to go to my boss because he may penalize me. There's a way to flip that to I'm going to work on communicating with my boss that's my truth, and I trust that it's going to work out. Something like that.
Yeah.
So what happens is when I ask people to flip it, they're really challenged by it. So that gives me a clue that the tape they're playing, the story they're telling is the negative story of what they don't want to have happen, and they don't have a clear picture of what they want to create. So we do a lot of work around getting crystal clear on what they are going to create and living more into that. So whether it's a word or a short little affirmation or mantra, and then we can tap into that. We can breathe into that. But that's really powerful. Just that exercise of getting someone to see what their limiting thoughts are on paper. That's why journaling is so powerful, is you get it on paper and we work on flipping it. And then when they flip it, it still usually has to be put on steroids. It's still not clear enough, concise enough. The words aren't powerful enough. And so there's a whole process. And then you have to go about practicing it after that to rewire the brain.
Yeah. And what I think is important to pair that with, and you said it before when you were talking about the coherence exercise and through the heart math process, where you evoke a certain emotion with it. So you pair a positive emotion to it. And I found, Jeff, that that's something that is a critical component to kind of to kind of boost that belief and be able to combat the fact that the negative ones tend to have more staying power than the positive ones. So,
Yeah.
so that's not always easy for people, but it's with practice you can evoke it. So when you consider the belief that you want to hold, such as I trust that if I tell my manager my truth, it will be well received. There needs to be this emotional component that you add to it, right? Like that sense of power or confidence that
Yes.
it's going to go well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. You make up a great point that many of us are still doing it from the mind, and we have to bring these renewing emotions confidence, compassion, care, appreciation, gratitude, and really live in the place of, you'd say the word abundance, but just everything that you have and who you are as this, leader, human individual that can do great things in the world. Like, there's a lot of evidence showing that maybe you aren't that. And then it's your part of your responsibility being here is to play bigger. Like the way when you just like, you got bigger when you talked about confidence and power. We work on alter egos as well. Like, sometimes you have to borrow the belief from someone else. So if you don't have it, you can live into another person or character who has that.
Yeah.
And that's a version of what you just described. Like, really, the way you just sat up in your chair and talked about confidence and power, like I could see your energy shift just talking about that. So more of that
Yeah.
for we want to change and how we want to show up in different settings, right? So Rafa Nadal was known for having incredible energy on the court, but off the court, he was much more chill and mellow. So he would transform into a different character, if you will, a heroic character that allowed him to have the confidence. When I get on stages, I do the same thing. Sometimes I start growling and kind of coughing and like getting anything like out of my body. And I hop up and down. Another exercise, I get people to shake and hop. Humans are the only animals that do not shake and hop. And that's why dancing is so therapeutic for people, like moving your body.
Yeah.
But every other animal, when they feel stressed out, they shake their body. And so I'm wanting to normalize in organizations and companies hopping and shaking, coherence breathing, tapping. Like, these are like weird things, right? That people would be like, this is so weird. But those are the things we could be doing everywhere, and it would
Yeah.
make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's proven too. And you learn it from the top performers. These are, I was thinking about recently, I heard about, I'm forgetting his name, lead singer of Queen. What was his name?
You asked the wrong guy with
Okay. But I'm
music history.
forgetting it. I'm forgetting his name. It's crazy that I was just reading about him.
It comes
But
to me. I'll
yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody, all those big hits, right? So he would have that kind of transformation that you just described Rafael Nadal would have, which is when he would go on stage in front of a huge audience, he had energy that was bursting out of him. And it would be for the performance sake and for the sake of the audience and to put on a great show. And then he would come off the stage and people would, Freddie Mercury. My goodness, Freddie Mercury. So then Freddie Mercury would come off the stage and he would have a completely different energy about him. But it was a balance that he learned how to be able to tap into for the moments when he really wanted to be big and play big. But he did it because he loved what he was doing. He loved the audience. He loved connecting with the audience. I love what I do here with these podcasts because I get to learn from great minds such as yourself, and I get to take a lot of notes. So I'm getting a lot out of this conversation, Jeff. So thank you for all sharing all this good stuff. I want to always end with just something that we could consider that would be advice that you would give. And so I like to sometimes create a scenario. I know that you told me that you're into pickleball lately, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to play more, but that's the thing that I've crossed over from tennis, and tennis people, sometimes they give me a hard time about it.
Well, I never played pickleball, but it looks like so much fun. And I know a lot of people who play. So let's imagine this scenario, okay? Let's say Carlos plays pickleball too, and he's going to the court. You're there at the court and you're finishing up your game, and then you cross paths on the side of the court. And you just strike up a conversation with Carlos, and he tells you about what he's going through, some of his panic and anxiety and the stress that he has at work, how it's affecting his health. And you just have a few seconds there because you have to leave. He's about to hop on and start his game, but you have a moment there to give him just one bit of advice. What would you tell him right there? What would you tell Carlos?
I would start tapping with him if he was willing. Like, if I have
love it.
1 minute with someone, because I've done this before, I've had people get on a Zoom call, they're 9 out of 10 panic attack. and I say, can we just do some tapping? And maybe we can get that 9 out of 10 down to a 6 or a 7. And that's what I would do. I got 1 minute. We're going to tap, and we're going to get some of that cortisol out of the body, because cortisol actually shifts, just in like 1 or 2 minutes of tapping. That would be the thing I would do. If they're willing to do the breathing, we can get some shifts to happen quickly. And then, of course, if I'm meeting them at a pickleball, they're probably not having a panic attack, because it's like you're outside, sweating, you're moving, you're talking with people. I've joked, but I'm actually serious. If everyone in the world played pickleball, the mental health crisis would decrease significantly, because racket sports train the brain in a different way than other sports. I think the research showed that racket sports, or tennis, is like one of, if not the healthiest sport. So you're moving your body, your brain is getting this incredible workout, and then you're also connecting with people. So in pickleball, it's just a huge on connection piece and the experience. So if everyone played, that's why people are gravitating towards it, because it's actually helping people's performance, mental health, and how they show up in the world, whether they realize it or not. It just makes them feel better. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would tap,
and then tell them go enjoy some pickleball, and
right.
go play more of it. And play more.
Absolutely right.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for really, this was incredible. I personally got a lot out of our conversation. I wrote a lot of things down, things I want to look into and research for myself and for the work that I do. And for anyone listening, if you want to learn more about Jeff, go to jeffsalzenstein.com. There's a lot of great information there. I know you're also active on all the socials as well. And Jeff's an incredible speaker, a performance coach. I really recommend checking him out, going to learn more about him through his website. Jeff, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. It was excellent.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Jeff's story is so unique, so interesting, how he went from being a professional tennis player, having his own journey of discovery, and you can tell how much he really believes in what he's saying here because of the results it's gotten for him and the people he's worked with. And I'll do my best to synthesize this down into the main insights and actionable takeaways. So the first of our 3 insights: the best tennis player in the world only wins 53% of points. What that is pointing to is that perceived failure is a part of everyone's journey. It's natural, it's ordinary to then have limiting beliefs or doubts. And the work is on how you regulate yourself through those perceived failures. Second insight: your zone of excellence is when your mind, body, and heart are all synced. The natural tendency to perceive threats, that's part of being human. It's happened through our evolution over thousands of years. So we have to be mindful of that, be very aware of when we're falling into that pattern, and reconnect to mind, body, and reconnect the mind, body, and heart. So it's all in sync. It's all working together. Third insight: I thought it was interesting that he brought up the importance of regulating alcohol use. And I wanted to bring that up as a major insight. How he's noticed when his clients have reduced their alcohol intake or completely removed alcohol from their lives, it's helped them to work through their anxiety. So consider how that could apply in your life. Actionable takeaways. Number 1, get up with the sun. The simplest teachings, like getting outside, walking in sunlight, these things make all the difference. So be sure that you're intentional about getting out in nature. Number 2, actionable takeaway. Kind of cheating here because there's 2 combining into 1. Coherence breathing and tapping. It's fascinating to me that 2 experts in a row brought up the work by HeartMath and heart-focused breathing, how we could slow our breath down, focus on the area of the heart, 5 minutes a day, layer in a positive emotion. And I love the stats were fascinating. Sleep improves by 36%. Calmness improves by 49%. Stress, anxiety, depression, anger decreases by 67% with a practice like this. So make this a part of your day. And the tapping, how when we tap our bodies at certain points, it will help to reduce cortisol levels. It'll help us to reconnect to the body. Third, actionable takeaway. Take inventory of your limiting beliefs. He brought up how you can take out a piece of paper and on the left-hand side, write out all those limiting beliefs. You don't necessarily want to keep reinforcing them. Just write them all out. And then on the right-hand side, flip those beliefs into things that are going to be more supportive of you and what it is you're looking to achieve. And be sure that you're evoking a powerful emotion that you're pairing with this new belief. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to be going through a workshop of sorts with you on how to master your beliefs. This is something I do with clients quite a bit when I feel that limiting beliefs are holding them back. A reminder that I don't publish this on YouTube. This will just be on your podcast platform of choice. So be sure to check it out there on Friday's shorter episode. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.